The anime introduces us to Takeru Kamishiro, a simple office worker whose life is a monotonous cycle of the same commute, the same job, and the same trip home, an ordinary existence that, while comforting to some, leaves a part of him yearning for a taste of something different. One day after work, as Takeru seeks a distraction on his TV, he's suddenly transported from his couch into a white void, standing before the very man he was just watching. This white-haired man introduces himself as the supervisor of the solar system, clarifying he's less an alien and more of a god, though he prefers the mundane title of the universe's middle management. He reveals a problematic planet called Medius where civilizations repeatedly collapse despite his interventions, explaining that he now needs to create a small ripple that can grow into a world-changing wave, and Takeru is to be that ripple. When Takeru resists, the god nonchalantly informs him that he is already dead, and refusing this transfer to Medius means his soul will simply vanish. Panicked, Takeru accepts and is allowed to choose special gifts. The god quickly jots down extreme magical potential before Takeru excitedly requests a cute companion. The god agrees, adding on enhanced exploration skills for gathering materials, a practical storage bag, fluency in the new world's language, and various resistances as a bonus. As Takeru's body begins to fade, the god has a last-minute moment of doubt, worrying he may have given him too much and expressing uncertainty about the specific companion chosen for him. Takeru's alarm at this cryptic warning is met only with a smile as he disappears, awakening in a forest on Medius in a new body, armed with only the promised bag and a stick he found on the ground. Completely lost, Takeru decides to search for civilization, but soon discovers his abilities by experimenting with words. Saying, "Scan," reveals the names of materials around him. And his first find is a B-rank moonlit herb, thrilling him with its potential value. He quickly learns to gather anything that glows, collecting akane mushrooms, elemental mushrooms, and prara leaves, but his most valuable find is what initially appears to be a stone, which his scan identifies as C-rank hammer, pangolin droppings. Disgusted, but practical, he notes its high rank and also figures out that his exploration magic marks tradable materials with special icons for easy tracking. With a decent haul, he heads to a nearby town where a guard named Marlowe, surprised by both Takeru's height and his rare profession as a material collector, directs him to the general store. Takeru immediately draws stares from the villagers due to his unusual height, and inside the shop, he presents the C-rank droppings to the shopkeeper, who is surprisingly ecstatic. The shopkeeper immediately recognizes the item, praising its exceptional shape and quality while handling it with his bare hands and offering 5 silver coins. After learning a silver coin is worth 1,000 rei and an inn costs 500 a night, Takeru realizes the droppings alone are worth 10 nights' stay and accepts the deal, only to watch in horror as the overjoyed man rubs the item on his face. Giving a vague story about being a traveling collector, Takeru sells the rest of his materials, prompting the shopkeeper to offer him a job to collect mithril ore from the eastern mountain. Takeru agrees, receiving a map and a staggering total of 360,000 rei for everything, a sum that leaves him floored by his first day's earnings, though the shopkeeper warns him that the mountain is crawling with monsters. Though slightly unsettled by the monster warning, Takeru shelves his worries and checks into an inn, only to face a new crisis: the severe lack of proper bathing facilities. A staff member offers him a bowl of hot water for a sponge bath, explaining that actual baths are a luxury reserved for nobles. This devastating news brings Takeru to his knees until the girl mentions that mages can use magic to clean people, an idea that sparks immediate hope. Dismissing the girl with a generous tip, he experiments and successfully casts a clean spell, magically washing his entire body in seconds. While incredibly convenient, the bath enthusiast in him finds it deeply unsatisfying. The next day, while gathering materials, his tracking ability leads him to a deceased adventurer's body instead of a resource. He discovers a family amulet containing a heartfelt letter from the man's sister and, unable to just leave him, Takeru gives him a proper burial. That evening, he sets up a magical protective barrier and cooks a hearty meat and wild herb soup, thoroughly enjoying his creation. Continuing his journey, he arrives at the Forest of White Trees, also known as the Forest of Ancient Dragons, a notoriously dangerous, monster-infested area. Curiously, his scan detects no mithril ore, nor does he encounter any living creatures, not even monsters, which bizarrely leads him to panic that his own body odor might be repelling everything. Deciding a clear path is a good thing regardless, he makes a run for it, only to abruptly fall off a cliff, frantically trying to shout a magic word for flight before he hits the ground. Thinking fast, Takeru shouts, "Fly," and manages to land safely at the bottom of the cliff, where his scanning ability immediately detects numerous ore readings. As he begins gathering, a tremor shakes the ground, signaling he should hurry. He uses a flame spell to blast through rock and finally uncovers mithril, an A-rank material, but the small piece feels insufficient. Another tremor urges him onward, and he follows a glowing blue light deeper into the cave, discovering a massive underground lake. A scan reveals it to be SS-rank magical water from an ancient dragon's lair, his most valuable discovery yet. Distracted by this, he barely registers a deep growl and a booming voice asking who dares to awaken it. Too focused on the thought of collecting some of this incredible water. As he dismisses the voice again and reaches for the lake, a colossal creature erupts from the surface, roaring in fury. The creature, a dragon, demands to be heard, surprised that Takeru can withstand its immense pressure. Realizing his mistake, Takeru performs a deep formal bow of apology, a gesture perfected by years of office life, which amuses the dragon. After introducing himself, Takeru learns from the dragon, who calls himself Voldius, that it was Takeru's overwhelming magical power that awoke him from his slumber, a power Voldius claims rivals his own. It's only then that Takeru realizes he's face to face with the legendary ancient dragon. Voldius quickly gets to the point. He needs Takeru's pure magical energy to help hatch his son's egg, which has been stalled by stagnant, corrupted mana in the cave. As payment, Voldius instantly creates a massive chunk of magical mithril ore. Intrigued by the mercenary offer, Takeru agrees, and the dragon presents him with the unhatched egg. Impressed by the massive egg, Takeru is unsure how to proceed until Voldius instructs him to simply pour his magic into it. Assuming it needs warmth, Takeru uses his heat magic, but is suddenly and violently absorbed into the egg itself. He finds himself in a void before a different god, this one with black hair who scolds him for being reckless and creating massive ripples in a world he's been carefully managing for eons. Annoyed, the god declares he's reducing Takeru's ridiculous blessing before sending him back, cryptically stating a little trouble will do him good. Takeru awakens to the squeaking of the newly hatched dragon, who immediately pounces on him, smelling strongly of fish. Voldius instructs him to give the hatchling an alias, so Takeru names him Vi, short for the color violet. With Voldius's blessing, Vi joins Takeru's party, and the ancient dragon entrusts his powerful son to him before sinking back into the magical lake. After a quick cleaning spell to get rid of Vi's fishy smell, the pair find a spot to camp for the night. Takeru gives Vi some of the SS-rank magical water, learning that Voldius magically linked his item box to the underground lake, granting him an unlimited supply essential for raising a dragon hatchling. That night, Takeru effortlessly creates magic stones, which he read are quite valuable to form a protective barrier and start a cooking fire, then prepares a hearty soup with seasoned meat and vegetables for their dinner. As soon as the food is ready, Takeru notices Vi drooling and offers him a bowl, which the eager dragonet promptly scalds his tongue on, forcing a bemused Takeru to blow on it for him. Happy they can share meals, Takeru asks if Vi is lonely without his father, and the small dragon responds by cuddling close, making it clear he's content. Takeru is charmed, but a look at Vi's stats reveals the cute creature is a B-rank monster with an astounding affinity for nearly every element, the blessing of the ancient dragon, and the potential for infinite evolution. Reeling from the power of his new companion, Takeru resolves to be a responsible guardian, if only to avoid Voldius's wrath. He sighs, reflecting that while he wished for a cute partner, he was definitely expecting a girl, not a reptile, and is sure the gods set this up on purpose. The next morning, they climb back to the forest of ancient dragons, which now seems less intimidating. As Vi happily explores, Takeru gathers C-rank materials until a terrified Vi comes flying back to him. A quick monster scan reveals 7 aggressive creatures nearby, leading Takeru to realize his monster-repelling scent must have worn off. He sees an opportunity for valuable monster parts, just as a C-rank rock hawk, a fierce, carnivorous bird known for its speed and sharp beak, swoops in. Unimpressed after facing Voldius, Takeru's appraisal ability focuses less on the threat and more on the fact its meat is sweet, rich, and its spine can be processed into seasoning. Viewing the creature as a flying ingredient, he instantly erects a barrier and prepares an attack, creating ice needles with his magic and declaring that if he must hunt, it will be for survival and sustenance as the rock hawk dives. Takeru effortlessly dispatches the rock hawk with just 3 ice needles, but his victory is short-lived as Vi warns of more monsters approaching, a prospect Takeru only sees as an opportunity for more ingredients. A pack of C-rank serpent wolves, fierce omnivores with paralyzing venom in their snake-like tails, surrounds them. But Takeru remains unfazed. Buffing himself with speed and weight reduction magic, he launches into the air and uses hardened limbs to eliminate one with a powerful kick before quickly dispatching the rest with his bare fists. As he harvests the materials, his scanner reveals an overwhelming number of monsters closing in, forcing him to abandon a protracted fight. Vi desperately tries to airlift him to safety, and when Takeru lightens his own weight with magic, the tiny dragon soars too high and accidentally drops him. After a panicked dive from Vi, Takeru awakens unharmed back at their previous campsite to the familiar fishy smell of the dragonette licking his face. Grateful but shaken, he asks Vi to be a bit gentler next time, a request the happy dragon seems to accept. Continuing their journey towards Tormi village, Vi becomes curious about the stick Takeru carries, which he reveals is actually a dormant, SS rank branch from the legendary world tree, Yggdrasil. Hearing this, Vi breathes his mana-infused smoke onto it, awakening its power and transforming the simple branch into a magnificent staff. Takeru is conflicted, worried that wielding a staff makes him look less like a material collector and more like a flashy mage. His contemplation is cut short by a deep growl from the woods, and while Takeru prepares for another fight, the ever-curious Vi flies recklessly toward the source of the sound. Panicked, Takeru chases after Vi and finds him circling a tree, where a weak elven girl is slumped against its base. He assumes she was attacked by a monster, but the deep growl he heard before echoes again, and he's stunned to realize it's coming from her stomach. She weakly explains she hasn't eaten in 3 days, so Takeru quickly offers her his water and a packed lunch from the innkeeper. The girl devours the food, dramatically proclaiming its heavenly taste, though Takeru dryly notes that anything tastes amazing when you're starving. He questions why she'd travel so unprepared, but gets distracted when he notices her smell, bluntly remarking that she smells like manure instead of the springtime breeze he'd imagined for elves. Offended, but knowing he's right, she blames her days of camping before abruptly thanking him for his help, chiding him for his rudeness, and rushing off. Confused but undeterred, Takeru and Vi continue gathering materials on their way out of the forest. Just as they reach the edge, Vi spots a carriage in the distance, impressing Takeru with his sharp senses. Upon closer inspection, Takeru's appraisal ability identifies the horse pulling the carriage as an E-rank unicorn, a common draft animal in this world. The driver, assuming from the new staff that Takeru is a mage, offers a ride and is surprised to learn he's a rare, specialized material collector. Playing along, Takeru nervously laughs off the specialist comment as the man offers him a ride back to Tormi. After a moment of hesitation due to his size, he's warmly invited aboard by the man's wife and their 2 children, who find his height amusing. Takeru notes that children seem to like him in this new world, which helps put their parents at ease. The driver assures him there's no trouble, explaining that the people of Tormi believe in helping each other. When Takeru playfully asks the kids what they'd do if he were a bandit, they laugh and point to a small bell, a magic item that would have rung if he had any ill intent. After formal introductions, the driver is Porum, his wife is Elisa, and their children are Yunan and Kane. A small noise from Takeru's coat reminds him of Vi. At the children's excited insistence, Takeru cautiously lets the dragonette out, warning him to behave. While the kids are delighted by Vi's cuteness, the adults are stunned. Takeru explains he's a black dragon hatchling, carefully omitting his ancient dragon parentage, and clarifies he isn't a dragon rider but simply found and hatched the egg himself, a feat that leaves Porum and Elisa speechless. Elisa explains that even dragon riders are a rare sight, making a true dragon an almost unheard of marvel. As night falls, the family stops the carriage to make camp. Takeru uses his magic to create a fire and sets up another protective barrier with magic stones, reassuring the family that Vi will also alert them to any danger, which puts everyone at ease. As Elisa prepares to cook, Takeru insists on making dinner as a thank you, impressing the family by pulling various ingredients from his item box. He whips up his specialty meat soup, this time with steak, alongside a mushroom and vegetable salad. The family is stunned first by the appearance and then by the incredible taste of the meal. Porum is so overcome with emotion that he begins to weep, explaining that after days of eating nothing but dried meat, tasting such a feast with his happy children is overwhelming. Takeru laughs at the dramatic reaction, but Porum abruptly stops crying to accuse him of being a flavor sorcerer. The accusation is so ridiculous that everyone bursts into laughter. To end the perfect evening, Porum plays a guitar while Elisa sings, and Vi dances joyfully with the children, who pull Takeru into their celebration. For the first time since arriving in this new world, Takeru realizes the simple joy of sharing a meal and laughter with others, a stark contrast to his silent, lonely dinners back on Earth. And he laughs truly and freely from the heart. The next morning, as the children were still sleeping, Porin readied the carriage for their departure, and Elisa, curious about the early activity, approached Takero to see what he was up to. He explained he was simply maintaining his shears, prompting Elisa to praise him, noting that people who take good care of their tools always do excellent work. Takero found himself thinking that this kind of work felt surprisingly good, and even though he'd stumbled into it by chance, he believed gathering materials truly suited him. Finally, after breakfast, Porin's family set out, but this time, Takero chose to sit in the driver's seat with him. He took the unicorn's reins and urged it to pick up the pace, and to Porin's surprise, the creature obeyed instantly. Porin was a bit taken aback that Takero had already won over the unicorn, but Takero simply explained that the animal was just very intelligent. A while later, they arrived at the town of Tormi, where Porin's family bid a heartfelt farewell to Takero, thanking him for everything. Takero thanked them in return, since their kindness had saved him from walking the entire way back. After watching them leave, Marlowe commented that Porin's return was a sure sign that spring had finally arrived. Curious, Takero asked what Porin did, and Marlowe explained that he travels to warmer regions during the winter, making a living by weaving, so his return always heralded the coming of spring. Marlowe mentioned how difficult their nomadic life was, which made Takero understand why Porin had cried over his food, and he realized how fortunate he was to have his gathering skills. His thoughts were interrupted by Marlowe, who reminded him to report to Jerome about his work. Takero headed over immediately, and while Bai played with the town's children, Jerome began inspecting the items he'd brought back, including the piece of mithril he had requested. Takero handed it over, anxiously awaiting the verdict. The silence stretched on as Jerome meticulously inspected the small fragment, his grunts the only sound in the room. Finally, Jerome spoke, declaring that what Takero had brought was insane. His instincts told him it was true magic mithril ore. Although Takero already knew, Jerome was visibly shaken, demanding to know where he had found such a legendary material. Takero, shocked by its immense value, couldn't hide his surprise. Jerome explained that it was like a concentrated mass of mana, so powerful that a few fragments could replace all the magic stones used throughout the entire kingdom. Stunned by this revelation, Takero nervously began to lie, claiming he just happened to find it lying around. Jerome clarified that even if he simply stumbled upon it, the fact that he picked it up showed he possessed both luck and skill. However, he cautioned that skill alone wasn't enough, as Takero lacked even the most basic common sense about this world, which is why he strongly advised him to go to Belkane. Belkane, he explained, was a city 1,000 times larger than their town, a place where Takero could find all sorts of information and even an adventurer's guild to learn how the world works, and they would buy any materials he gathered. Jerome admitted it would pain him to see such talent leave, but if Takero could make a name for himself and spread the word about Tormi, his own shop would eventually prosper. Takero just smiled nervously, knowing deep down he had no plans to become famous, but the idea of the grand city intrigued him. That night at the inn, he decided to research the terms Jerome had mentioned, learning that a guild was simply an association managing adventurer requests across the land. The book detailed how adventurers were categorized into combat, support, and various other roles. Closing the book, Takero reflected on his situation. Being in another world, he desperately wanted to travel and see things he never could before. Becoming an adventurer seemed like the perfect way to earn money while exploring, so he set his sights on joining the guild in Belkane. However, there were still things he wanted to do in Tormi, so he decided to take his time. Bai seemed to agree with his plan, and over the next few days, Takero spent quality time with the townspeople, learning new things and joining in their celebrations. Finally, the time came for him to leave. A woman handed him various supplies for his journey, including a bag of broth powder made from rock hawk bones, and asked if he needed any other seasonings. Takero assured her he had plenty, thanks to her generosity. Suddenly, her expression turned sad as she confessed she would feel lonely without him. Takero admitted he would miss her too. She mentioned the villagers wished he would stay longer, but he explained there was too much out there he wanted to see to stay, even if he wanted to. Understanding, she promised not to hold him back and decided to pack him a lunch, knowing it would take him about a month to reach Belkane. Takero smiled, thanking her for the gesture, but she kept piling bags into his arms until he was grateful for his item box. Back at the inn, he pondered what to do with the magic mithril ore since Jerome couldn't buy it. Perhaps he could find a use for it himself. Bai also tried to think of something but quickly gave up and went to sleep. And Takero couldn't blame him, as he was drawing a blank too. Still, he felt indebted to the town and wanted to create something that could help them. Just then, a memory from the town's celebration sparked an idea. Using a lamp and the piece of magic mithril ore, he concentrated, picturing the finished object in his mind, and in mere seconds, he successfully crafted a special kind of lamp. The next day, the entire town gathered to see him off, and Porin couldn't help but cry. Before leaving, Takero told Marlowe that he had created a magic tool that projects a barrier around the town. This way, anything with malice or harmful intent would be unable to enter. Marlowe was stunned to hear how powerful it was and asked if Takero was truly certain they could accept such a gift. Takero explained it was his way of thanking them and a wish for their safety until he returned. Marlowe sincerely thanked him, assuring him he would always be welcome back. Takero replied that he would definitely return, as the town of Tormi was now his home. Everyone was touched by his words, but Jerome suddenly grabbed the lamp to inspect it closely. Just as he noticed the valuable piece of mithril embedded within, Takero made a run for it, calling out for them to take care. The townspeople waved goodbye as Jerome, left with no choice but to accept the gift, simply urged him to be careful out there. And so, Takero and Bai set off on their journey, wondering what kind of place Belkane would be. After walking for a while, he remarked on how peaceful the surroundings were, but at that very moment, they stumbled upon a giant crab blocking their path. Without hesitation, Takero used his appraisal skill and identified it as a C-rank Monblack crab, an omnivorous, edible burrowing type. That last detail was all that mattered to Takero, who excitedly told Bai that crab meat was incredibly delicious and that they were having a feast tonight. With that, he instantly used reduction and harden on his body, preparing for a fight. Before he could make a move, however, Bai darted forward and unleashed a sonic attack, defeating the crab without even touching it. Takero was surprised Bai had such an ability, but his relief was short-lived as several more Monblack crabs surrounded them in seconds. Unintimidated, Takero reasoned they were just crabs, meaning they could only move sideways, a weakness he could exploit. Just as he finished his thought, the crabs suddenly began charging forward, catching him completely off guard. Before they could crush him, Bai swiftly lifted him to safety, causing the crabs to crash into each other. Takero thanked Bai for the save but noticed one Monblack crab was still standing and decided to face it himself, declaring he would enjoy eating it. The crab lunged at him, but Takero unleashed his ultimate technique, striking it down with his staff. With all the Monblack crabs defeated, he wasted no time preparing their meal that night. First, he used harden on his hand to protect it and skillfully cut off all the legs. Once finished, he placed a large pot over the fire, tossed in the legs with plenty of water and salt, and let them boil. After a while, the crab was ready. Takero pulled out a leg, cracked the shell, and began to eat. Both he and Bai were mesmerized by the taste, making Takero more excited than ever to continue his journey, eager to explore new places and try more incredible food. Together, they savored the meal, and after a long journey, they finally arrived at the merchant city of Belkane. At first glance, Takero was completely and utterly awestruck, praising the fortress wall's beautiful architecture. He uses his appraisal skill, which confirms he's in the merchant city of Belkane in the kingdom of Alcerio, home to the largest adventurers' guild on the continent. Takero notices a long line for inspection before entering the city and decides to magically disguise his item bag to look ordinary. When his turn comes, he asks Bai to stay quiet and hidden for a moment, and the little dragon tucks himself inside Takero's coat. As the guards inspect his bag, one comments that it's rare to see a material gatherer and asks if he's there to sell his finds. Takero clarifies he's come because he's interested in the Adventurers Guild. The inspector isn't surprised, explaining that Belkane is the city of commerce and adventure. After all, he tells Takero that people like him are welcome but that he still needs to do his job and will cast a spell called Aberrus. Seeing Takero's confusion, the inspector explains it's a magic that checks newcomers for suspicious traits. The man approaches Takero with a magical object resembling a magnifying glass, but finds nothing out of the ordinary. The woman inspecting his gear also confirms his belongings are fine, much to Takero's relief. Still, he wonders what his status looks like to others, so he uses his scan skill to peek at what the inspector sees. His appraisal only reveals the man's name is Raiden, a gate inspector for Belkane's security division. This isn't what Takeru wanted, so he probes deeper until his skill finally shows him how others perceive him. A 19-year-old with no assigned rank, who can use magic and has some skills but possesses no spirit. Takeru notes his status looks rather basic and assumes the gifts from the god don't appear to others. Just as the inspector deems everything in order, he notices something else. Takeru thinks he's free to go, but Raiden asks about the dragon's blessing his magical item detected. Rather than explain, Takeru decides to show him and tells Bai he can come out. The small dragon pops out of his coat, and Takeru explains the blessing is likely because of his tiny companion. Both inspectors are immediately smitten by Bai's cuteness, but Raiden quickly composes himself and asks Takeru to put some kind of tag on the dragon to prove ownership. Unsure what to use, Takeru rummages through his bag and finds the charm the village children gave him. He ties it to Bai's tail, and Raiden says that will suffice. He mentions he'll notify the mayor that a dragon has entered the city and that it won't cause trouble. The woman returns his bag, pointing him toward the Adventurers Guild at the end of the main street, the largest building in sight. Takeru thanks them for the information, and Raiden finally welcomes him to Belkane. As Takeru and Bai step into the city, they are immediately struck by its vibrant energy. Takeru remarks that it feels like he's truly arrived in another world, even though he's been in Matius for a while. Following the woman's directions, he walks down the main street until he spots an enormous building, which he correctly assumes is the Adventurers Guild, and decides to head inside with Bai following close behind. The moment they step through the door, a girl with rabbit ears approaches them, welcomes them to the Europa Adventurers Guild. She introduces herself as the receptionist, Ariana, and says that new adventurer registrations are always welcome. Takeru follows her to her desk where she asks him to fill out a form with his name and current occupation. As he fills it out, he doesn't even realize he can read and write the language despite never having done so before. Somehow, his thoughts are just transferring onto the paper, a convenient, if mysterious, ability. Once he's finished, Ariana gets excited, seeing he's a material gatherer and asks if he has any combat experience. Takeru mentions he has a little, having fought a giant bird, a lopo serpent, and a really delicious crab. Surprised, Ariana asks if he has any proof of that last one, just for confirmation. Takeru hesitates, explaining it's rather large and he's not sure if it's okay to bring it out. A bit nervous, the receptionist urges him to do so. Takeru then pulls a whole Mont Blanc crab from his item box, one of the many he and Bai defeated earlier. Ariana immediately panics as the giant crab completely crushes her desk. Only then does Takeru realize his mistake, but before he can apologize, the poor receptionist scrambles away in terror. The cloud of dust obscures the chaos, prompting the other adventurers to ask what's going on. As the dust settles, Takeru awkwardly explains it's just a Mont Blanc crab, though that's obvious to everyone. After the little incident, he nervously asks if the crab will suffice as proof of his experience. Still stunned, Ariana tells him it's more than enough. However, one of the adventurers points out that he has an item box. Takeru confirms it but unconvincingly explains it was just a gift. Suddenly, the adventurer's eyes begin to glow as he uses some kind of skill on Takeru, observing him intently. After a few seconds, the man confirms Takeru isn't lying and tells Ariana everything is fine, as he's telling the truth and is blue. Feeling a bit confused, Takeru asks what he means by blue. The adventurer replies that he used Aberus, apologizing for using it without warning, and explains that his version of the skill reads a person's nature. Blue means he's clean, with no ill intentions, so he knows Takeru isn't a bad person. Since he wasn't lying, Takeru figures it's fair. Setting that aside, the man suggests moving on to the appraisal and payment. But Ariana reminds him that Takeru is still in the middle of his registration. This confuses the man, who thought Takeru was there to sell the crab shell. Hearing this, Takeru corrects him, saying he actually just wants to eat it. Everyone in the guild is left speechless, asking if he's really going to eat that thing. Takeru can only smile awkwardly, not understanding the fuss, since in his opinion, Mont Blanc crab meat is incredibly delicious. The adventurer decides to drop the subject and continue with the registration, asking if he has any party members. Takeru points to Bai, which surprises everyone once again. Having a dragon as a partner instantly boosts his reputation, and just like that, Takeru starts to draw a lot of attention. Noticing this, he begins to feel uneasy. Ariana decides to finalize his registration, explaining that according to guild rules, everyone starts at F rank, the lowest. She tells him she'll be supporting him, and Takeru thanks her as he accepts the bracelet she hands him, noting that now he and Bai both have a new accessory for their journey. Takeru located the deceased adventurer's family to return his belongings and deliver the unfortunate news of his passing. He informed them that he found the man dead in the forest near Tormi village, but assured them the adventurer likely did not suffer. The family wept upon hearing the news, though the adventurer's mother noted that he had always been reckless and prone to causing trouble. The father thanked Takeru for delivering the information, though his sentence was cut short by a coughing fit. Takeru immediately recalled that it was Raidon who had identified the deceased's possessions as belonging to Balluri Fent, a man who had taken jobs specifically to pay for his father's medicine. Takeru had only intended to hand over Balluri's possessions, but upon seeing the father's severely weakened state, he resolved to do more to help the family. Some time later, Takeru met with an appraiser at the guild, presenting 8 prara leaves, 6 pola roots, 20 pencil mushrooms, and 20 mother mushrooms. The appraiser was delighted by the materials, noting he had never seen such large mushrooms, and commented that their clients spoke highly of Takeru. Despite having been at the guild for a short time, they were already requesting him for specific tasks. Takeru admitted he was honored to hear this. Just then, Ariana entered the room to inform him that they had received many job requests for him, and while he couldn't accept them all, he decided to take at least a few. Ariana thanked him and confirmed she would notify the clients. After a long day, Takeru decided to unwind at the city baths, grateful that he could take a proper bath in this world. It had been half a month since they arrived in Belkame, and when they first arrived, the bathhouse was dirty, leading Takeru to use cleaning magic on it immediately. Now, he could end his days by relieving his exhaustion in a clean bath, and he couldn't be happier. While relaxing, a lizardman from the guild named Claystone joined him. Takeru was surprised, as Claystone usually didn't come at this hour, but Clay explained that his old scars were bothering him, suggesting rain was imminent. Claystone also brought up the rumor that Takeru could use healing spells, as he had heard Takeru treated a sick man in the slums. Takeru understood this referred to Balluri's father, whom he had healed using healing magic that day, clarifying that he was merely imitating something he had seen before. Though he admitted he hadn't charged for the service, Claystone praised him as truly selfless, but pointed out that he could have made a fortune. Takeru grew worried, asking if the healers who charged for their services now hated him, which only made Clay roar with laughter. Dropping the subject, Clay asked if Takeru had received a notification about ranking up. Takeru simply stated he was happy with the current situation and had no desire to rise in rank. Claystone confirmed once more that Takeru was selfless, but warned him that acting this way would only draw more attention. Takeru clarified that there were things he did desire, such as sharp shears for gathering materials. Clay left the bath, stating that wasn't what he meant, but advised Takeru to learn more about the world. Sometime later, Takeru returned to the guild after completing a job, and the appraiser once again asked him to. The appraiser once again urged Takeru to rank up, as had been requested multiple times, noting that given his demonstrated abilities, a higher rank was certainly within his reach. Takeru reiterated that he was truly not interested in ascending, knowing that if he wasn't careful, rising in rank could bring him more problems, and that doing as he pleased from a low rank was far better. A peace he did not want to disrupt right now. Just then, an adventurer rushed into the guild with terrible news: goblins were attacking. The guild master immediately ordered that all adventurers, rank D and above, be contacted to gather at the North Station, and that all available healing mages and medics be brought forth. He then asked a girl named Muesli which rank A adventurers were still in the city. She reported that Brow and Mohammed were absent, but Claystone was available. The guildmaster, referring to Claystone as the Honorable Dragon King, asked her to contact him immediately. Takeru witnessed the entire scene but decided to leave the guild, thinking it was none of his business, as he was only rank F. Despite this, the guildmaster stopped him immediately and told him that he was going too. With no other option, Takeru attended the strategy meeting, where the guildmaster announced that the front line was at the Stafford Plains to the southwest. The goblins were heading straight for Belkame, and they could not allow them to cross the bridge over the Salves River. All the adventurers agreed, and Takeru observed their passion, though he privately considered them to be true combat fanatics. As someone more inclined toward the liberal arts, Takeru knew he couldn't keep up and felt completely out of place. Just then, a pair of adventurers named Diego and Harold approached him, noting that since he was rank F, he should stay back and not get in the way, though they were sure he'd be too frightened to be of any use anyway. As they laughed, the guild master walked over to Takaro and mentioned that he must be the gatherer that Grid kept talking about. Takaro nervously introduced himself, and the guild master told him that everyone had good things to say about him and that it was rare for Grid to praise someone without reservations. Hearing this, Takaro offered an uncomfortable smile and said he was honored. The guild master stared intently at him without blinking, then laughed, pleased to see that Takaro was the first person not to be intimidated by his presence, betting that he was far more impressive than he appeared. Diego and Harold disagreed, finding Takaro to be a weakling, while Takaro inwardly wished he hadn't been praised so much, as he didn't want to draw negative attention. The guildmaster simply departed, saying Takaro could protect himself despite being rank F, and that he only needed to fight for what he wished to protect. Diego and Harold left with the boss, leaving Muesli with Takaro. She mentioned that she couldn't believe the boss was sending rank F adventurers out there and apologized. But at the same time, she was excited that they were there now. Muesli was confused but excited to participate in the action. She introduced herself and explained that she could use a bit of healing magic, so they had to work hard to meet the guildmaster's expectations in this battle. Despite her initial enthusiasm, as they headed to the mission base, Muesli was visibly terrified, clinging to Takaro as if her life depended on it, trying to deny her fear despite her tears. Takaro knew he had to calm her down quickly or she would be a liability. He reminded her that they were in the rear guard, where they couldn't even see the enemy, and yet she was terrified. If she could use her healing magic, she should focus on treating the wounded, because nobody said she had to fight. Takaro reassured her that it was okay to be afraid, and Muesli, for once, stopped crying and listened. He told her that combatants get hurt on the battlefield, so it was natural to be scared, and she shouldn't be ashamed for feeling it. Those who fight do so because they are afraid, and they just need to do what they can to survive, and she possessed the power to achieve that. Muesli quickly wiped away her tears, changing her attitude and regaining her excitement, resolving to do her best. Once back at the base, Claystone approached Takaro after overhearing his speech. Takaro admitted the passionate words were unlike him, but Clay clarified that he just thought Takaro could speak with passion sometimes. Putting that aside, Takaro mentioned that he thought Claystone would be on the front lines, but Clay explained that his old scars were acting up and his body wasn't responding. Takaro assumed he meant the deep scars on his back that he saw in the baths and asked if that was why. This was clearly a sensitive topic for Clay, who fell silent for a moment. Once composed, Clay asked Takaro if he didn't think such scars were a mark of shame for a warrior, since anyone would assume he got them running away from an enemy. Takaro countered that Clay got those scars defending someone, and though he was severely injured, he was still alive, meaning he could still protect someone else. Clay was surprised, but admitted that was one way to look at it. Just then, they received the signal from the guild master, who reported that the formation had been breached and enemy forces would arrive soon. Claystone grabbed a weapon without hesitation, saying he was going to the front because even if his body broke, he would protect them, and he left before Takaro could object. However, Takaro knew Clay wouldn't be able to protect anyone if he destroyed himself. Despite the chaos, Muesli remained composed, and Takaro realized he couldn't keep avoiding trouble. He drew his staff and activated a magic shield, surrounding the area with strong walls to protect the base. Takaro informed Muesli that he was going to check on Clay and immediately left, arriving on hands and knees to face the goblins blocking his path. He hesitated slightly, acknowledging that even though goblins were monsters, facing humanoid creatures was always difficult. Still, he knew he couldn't worry about that now, so he asked Bai to take them down. The small dragon prepared a powerful attack, and all the nearby adventurers immediately took cover. In a matter of seconds, all the goblins were taken out of commission thanks to Bai, much to the surprise of Diego and Harold. Diego and Harold thanked them for saving them, explaining that a high-ranking monster, a goblin sergeant, had appeared, causing the front line to collapse. They managed to escape thanks to Claystone, but they got separated from him and had no way of finding him. In another scene, we see Claystone fighting the goblins alone in the rain, but the pain from his scars caused him to make a fatal mistake. Just as the goblins were about to finish him off, Bai stopped them with a lightning strike, just as before. Takaro quickly rushed to Claystone, saying he knew the weather was making his scars hurt. Clay yelled in pain when Takaro patted him on the back, so Takaro asked him to retreat, saying they would plan a counterattack. No sooner had he said that than a loud roar was heard in the distance, and Clay told him he couldn't retreat now. Takero clarified that he and Bai could fight, but Clay warned him that even if they fled, the goblins would catch up to them. The goblin sergeant suddenly appeared with a violent attack, and smaller goblins surrounded them. Clay dodged the attack, telling them to escape while he bought time. Seeing his determination, Takero asked Clay if those scars on his back were important to him, wanting to know if they were a memory of something, or perhaps someone important. While fighting the goblins, Clay replied that they were only proof of his foolishness, and that he utterly despised them. Takero confirmed that then Clay wouldn't mind if he erased them, so right after Bai created a barrier, Takero pulled some Voldius water from his bag and splashed it onto Clay's back. He then cast a spell called Ridiphalius, and healed his entire body. Claystone fell to his knees as his scars rapidly disappeared and his body transformed completely. Takero was stunned by how much he had changed, and Clay told him he felt strength surging from within, feeling young again. Thanks to this, he could fight the goblins with his bare claws, defeating them all in minutes. Once the area was cleared, the guild master approached Takero and asked if he was the one who unleashed Claystone's power. Takero explained that he merely used some healing magic, but the guild master told him he knew that wasn't all he could do. He also heard Takero cast some enormous spells, though that was actually Bai. The guild master asked who he really was, but Takero replied that he was just an ordinary rank F adventurer whose only skill was gathering materials. Despite how unconvincing that sounded, the guild master decided not to press further and told him the guild would reward him for his actions. That night, Claystone came to visit him, demanding an explanation of what he had done. Takero was happy to see he was well, but Clay clarified that he wasn't well at all, as he still felt a burning heat inside and needed to know what Takero did to him. Takero tried to calm him down, explaining he just threw magical elemental water and cast the Ridiphalius spell. And seeing Clay's confusion, Takero clarified that it was a highly concentrated and high-purity aggregation of elemental magic. The ancient dragon god had the highly concentrated and high-purity elemental magic water in his underground lake, which was connected to his bag. Clay was clearly lost. So Takero explained that Voldius was Bai's mother or father. The revelation that Bai was an ancient dragon surprised Clay, but he still asked why Takero had thrown that sacred water at him. Takero explained that because water elements were composed of magical power, he thought it would be absorbed through the skin and accelerate his recovery. It was truly an emergency, so he just wanted to do everything he could at that moment. Clay understood that Takero could use advanced healing spells, but once again, Takero insisted he was only copying something he had seen before. Apparently, healing magic was far more effective when one visualized the body's composition, and what he did only worked because he knew that important nerves were concentrated in the back. Hearing this, Clay maintained a serious expression and asked Takero who he really was. The question took Takero by surprise, and the heavy silence in the room made him feel conflicted. He began to wonder what he should do, because the young god hadn't forbidden him from revealing his identity, but doing so could cause a great uproar. And if that happened, he wouldn't be able to return to the life he had led until now, a life he didn't want to lose. However, Takero knew he was also responsible for what happened to Clay and couldn't simply lie to him. Noticing his internal conflict, Clay stood up with a sigh, telling Takero he wouldn't ask any more questions if it caused him such discomfort, and apologized for interrupting him. But before Clay could leave, Takero quickly stopped him, saying he would tell him because he trusted him. Clay paused, assimilating that there would be gossip, and finally, Takero confessed that he came from another world. A long silence followed that confession, but the tension quickly dissipated when Clay looked at him as if he were insane. Takero smiled nervously, saying it was normal for Clay to make that face after hearing something like that. He tried to explain the concept of reincarnation, and Clay assumed he meant when a soul receives a new body and is reborn. Takero replied that Clay was spot on, and told him he had died once and was reborn in this body. It took Clay a few minutes to process that information. Takero saw that Claystone was struggling to process the information, so Takero had him sit down and explained everything that had happened in detail. Clay decided to be honest, telling him the story sounded absurd and difficult to believe, but it was true that Takero had healed his old scars and transformed him into a dragon newt. A dragon newt is the ancestral species of the lizard dragons, and Clay admitted he felt proud to have taken on this noble blood form, though he was still a little scared, confessing he feared losing control and destroying everything. Takero tried to reassure him, saying he was sure Clay would eventually get used to it. Despite Takero's attempt to calm him, Clay grew furious again and told Takero to be more responsible. Takero countered that he couldn't go back to the way he was, and that Clay simply had to be careful not to get too excited. Clay clarified that it wasn't that simple and told Takero he had wanted to tell him for a long time that he does everything too casually, so he was going to seize the opportunity to give him a good reprimand. Takero was not at all thrilled to hear that but knew he couldn't escape, so he just had to endure it. Some time later, Takero and Bai decided to visit the city's artisan district, and after walking for a while, Takero stopped in front of a weapons shop, telling Bai that he wanted to buy something there. Just then, a woman with cat ears, clearly the shopkeeper, approached them, noticed Takero's interest, and greeted him with a smile, asking if anything had caught his eye. Takero decides to ask her if by any chance she sells shears for gathering materials, as his are clearly worn out and dull, but the woman informs him they don't have any, though she recognizes him as the material gatherer everyone has been talking about lately. When Takero confirms this, she introduces herself as Rib and says that in that case, she might be able to help him. She explains that her master, Grusis, is a top-tier blacksmith and will surely be able to assist, although he'll first need to acquire something the old man has been looking for. Takero agrees to hear the details, so Rib lets him into the workshop, where he is clearly impressed by their work. She mentions she is one of the people who fell in love with the forge's fire and assures him that one day she'll steal the old man's technique to forge a sword worthy of a hero. Takero hopes her dream comes true and follows her to Master Grusis's office, who immediately asks what Takero is doing there. Rib informs him he's the famous gatherer, prompting a skeptical Grusis to remark it's quite a reputation for a newcomer. Takero clarifies he's just been lucky. Rib then tells her boss that perhaps Takero could retrieve some Hydra ore from the perilous Ryujai mine for the sword they're presenting at the artisan exhibition. Grusis instantly refuses, stating he would never send a gatherer to such a dangerous place. Despite Rib's insistence, Grusis raises his voice, saying the answer is still no. Stubbornly, she reminds him of the deadline and provocatively pulls his beard, challenging him to use second-rate materials and see if he can still call himself a master. Enraged, Grusis tells her she has a lot of nerve and warns that the mine isn't just filled with monsters, there are rumors of demons down there. Rib admits she'd heard that as well and that it was rumored to be the reason the Hydra ore supply had dwindled. Grusis scolds her for not mentioning this to Takero, stating that a blacksmith who doesn't value life has no right to wield a hammer. While he appreciates her initiative, he won't send a young man to his death out of desperation. Moved by her master's integrity, Rib apologizes to Takero and asks him to forget the request. However, Takero simply offers them some cookies and says he understands the situation, then proposes a deal. If he successfully gathers the Hydra ore, Grusis must forge him a unique pair of shears as a reward. Grusis asks if he didn't hear the warnings, but Takero assures them he can handle whatever is in the mine. To prove his capability, he shows them a part from a beast that even B-rank adventurers would struggle to defeat. This is enough to convince them, and soon Takero is on a cart heading towards his destination beyond Buira village, which is managed by boss Raoul, when he is suddenly told someone wants to eat crab, but Takero informs them that unfortunately they don't have any left. Some passengers comment on the strange recent occurrences, like all the poisonous herbs in the Robri Pass withering overnight and disturbances in the forest of white trees. Takero listens quietly, trying to convince himself it wasn't his fault. After a while, he reaches a town with a horse merchant and thinks it would be nice to travel by horse someday. Just as he's about to leave, Takero hears a woman arguing with the seller and realizes it's the elf he met before. She's complaining that she ordered a pure white steed that could gallop through the skies, but he's showing her a giant white bird, not a horse. The man reminds her this is a horse dealership, and around here, any creature that can carry cargo is called a horse, whether it's a giant eagle or a giant bird. The elf, clearly unaware of this local custom, apologizes, admitting she might have worded her request poorly. The seller forgives her, saying he should have confirmed the details. Knowing she's looking for a white Pegasus, he suggests she might have better luck in Boss Raoul, the Dwarven Kingdom. The elf leaves happily with this new information, and Takero realizes they're heading to the same place. He tells his companions they can take their time and gather some materials along the way. First, he collects a norate mushroom, a poisonous-looking fungus with white spots on a green cap, which, despite its appearance, is a highly nutritious ingredient that boosts stamina. He also finds a maso mushroom, a red-capped fungus with white spots that promotes rapid growth. Takiro realizes the forest is a treasure trove of ingredients. They also find lunar nightgrass, a yellow flower said to bloom under the crescent moon, whose nectar is a favorite of spirits and helps relieve fatigue. When crushed, it can be used as an effective healing ointment. Takiro immediately uses his shears to collect some, but just as he does, a familiar growl echoes through the forest. This time, they instantly recognize the sound and, as expected, find the elf sitting against a tree, utterly parched and starving. Finding the situation all too familiar, Takiro offers her food and water once again. Revitalized, the woman approaches to shake his hand, expressing her immense gratitude. Takiro smiles, but is immediately taken aback by her odor, causing him to recoil. On impulse, he uses his cleaning magic, and in an instant, the elf is sparkling clean. Takiro sheepishly explains that he couldn't stand by and watch the pristine image of elegant elves be tarnished. The woman smiles and formally introduces herself as Belle Veretta Brole, acknowledging that elven names can be a mouthful for humans. She tells him he has done her a great service on both occasions, but Takiro quickly dismisses it, simply telling her to be careful on her journey. However, Belle stops him before he can walk away, insisting that elves do not repay kindness with indifference, though he replies that he didn't help her with the expectation of a reward. She insists, asking him to at least let her help with his work. Vi seems to approve of the idea, happy to have her around, so Takiro agrees to let her travel with them as a companion until they reach the next town. While he's gathering norate mushrooms, Belle comes running to him excitedly with Vi, claiming she's found something amazing. She proudly presents a rock, insisting it's the droppings of a hammer anteater, but Takiro uses his appraisal skill and informs her it's just a rock. Undeterred, Belle soon returns with another find, only for Takiro to tell her that this time, it's actual droppings. She tries one last time, and Takiro has to warn her that she's now holding a poisonous mushroom. Belle is surprised, then bursts out laughing with Vi at how terrifying that is, making Takiro think her mental age must be about the same as Vi's. When the sun sets, Belle goes to gather firewood, but Takiro tells her he has magic stones. However, she explains that leaving traces of a campfire is important, as it lets other travelers know the spot is safe for camping. With that, she heads off, returning a moment later not with kindling, but with an entire log. Before Takiro can question her, she tosses the log into the air, leaps after it, and with 2 daggers, slices it into perfect pieces of firewood. Takiro is stunned, wondering if all elves are this incredible. He recognizes her blades are impressive, and uses his appraisal skill on them, shocked to discover they are A-rank weapons, the first he's ever seen. Belle's daggers are called the Silver Jambia, a treasure of the High Elves. They are imbued with the power of wind spirits, increasing their speed and sharpness, with their effectiveness scaling based on the wielder's latent magical power. Only High Elves or those of a chosen bloodline can wield them. Putting that aside, Takiro uses the firewood to cook his favorite soup, which Belle is excited to try. With the first sip, she is blown away, and both she and Vi enjoy the soup immensely. Much to Takiro's delight, even if he thinks they're exaggerating. As they eat, Belle asks if he's also heading to Boss Raoul, and he explains he has a job to gather something called Hydra ore in the Ryujai mine. Takiro then asks why she's headed there, and Belle's expression turns serious as she explains she's searching for the white Pegasus of the skies, the one her sister Ryutakara has always dreamed of. Takiro tries to take her heartfelt quest seriously, but the dramatic moment is completely ruined when he notices the crumbs all over her face. Belle hastily wipes her mouth on her sleeve and changes the subject, noting that she has once again feasted on his food, increasing her debt to him. Takiro then suggests hiring her as his bodyguard, as he could use someone to teach him survival skills like the campfire trick. Belle is surprised he's asking for so little, though Takiro feels it's a significant request. After their meal, Belle declares that whatever fate brought them together is a good omen and accepts his offer, vowing to accompany him as his bodyguard. Takiro is briefly impressed by how reliable she sounds, but any image of reliability is shattered that night as her loud snoring keeps him awake. The next morning, the dark circles under his eyes are plain to see, but he carries on as Belle informs him that just across the river lies the Dwarven Kingdom and the Ryujin mountain range. Without thinking, he comments that it looks a lot like the Jotaka mountain range from his homeland, Bell has no idea what he's talking about, but he drops the subject and decides to find some food. They go to a restaurant and order 3 portions of Nana's specialty, meat-wrapped yuppie. He takes a bite and is immediately delighted by the flavor, while Belle remarks it's just as her friend described. He assumes she means another elf, but she clarifies that her friend is a lizardman with the title of Honorary Dragon King, a holy dragon knight of the Stolpus Empire. Her friend mentioned heading to Belkin, so he might have already crossed paths with him. Just then, Clayton appears out of nowhere and tells her it was much more than a simple crossing of paths. Belle greets her friend cheerfully, saying it's been ages, but Clay scolds Takiro for leaving without telling him. A nervous Takiro explains that he did report his trip to the guild, so he should have known. Clay accuses him of being too vague as always and asks where exactly he's headed. Takiro tells him he's going to the Ryujai mine to gather Hydra ore, shocking Clay, who says that mining contracts like that are far above his rank. Takiro explains that the blacksmiths seem to be in a tough spot and he couldn't just ignore them. Clay warns him that the Ryujin mine is extremely dangerous and the reward better be worth it. Takiro assures him it is, as Grusus promised to forge him the ultimate pair of shears. He muses that if he earns the favor of a top-tier blacksmith, he might even get a good cooking pot or an omelet pan later on. Clay is initially taken aback but then sighs, saying he can't tell if Takiro is just kind-hearted or hopelessly naive. Takiro insists that for a gatherer, a good pair of shears is more valuable than any sword, making it a great reward in his eyes. Feeling he has no other choice, Clay decides to accompany him, since he was already planning to visit Boss Raoul to get his spear repaired. Takiro hesitates, but Belle is thrilled to learn that Clayton will also be his bodyguard. She explains that she's already traveling with Takiro in that capacity, and Clay admits the title has a nice ring to it, so he agrees to be Takiro's second bodyguard. Now, with a scolding old samurai and a clueless elf by his side, Takiro can't help but feel a strange sense of unease. The next day, they finally arrive at Boss Raoul but find a massive crowd waiting to get in. Takiro notes that the entrances to all the cities they've visited have been just as packed, which is becoming a serious problem. Seeing this, Clay speaks to one of the guards, and they are immediately allowed to pass without waiting. Takiro asks if that's okay, as it feels like VIP treatment, but Clay clarifies he simply greeted a guard he knew. The guard leads them inside, explaining that Boss Raoul began as a mining settlement built within the great caverns left after iron extraction, and welcomes them to the Dwarven Kingdom. Takiro is stunned to see the entire city, including a pool, built underground. The guard then informs Clayton that the king has requested his presence, leaving Takiro even more surprised to learn his friend knows the monarch. Clay says you could call it a long and complicated relationship, but the guard insists there's nothing complicated about it. After all, Clay is the hero who saved them from the Thunder King Sengun himself. Clayton downplays it, explaining that back then, the dwarves were skilled blacksmiths but couldn't wield weapons, forcing them to pay tribute to a ruthless demon lord. One day, the demon happened to see him passing by, took one look, and fled in terror, and that was that. Takiro is still impressed, and the guard adds that to commemorate the day, they built a statue in his honor. The others are awestruck by the grand statue, but Clayton is utterly embarrassed. Takiro tries to console him by saying it doesn't even look like him, but Clay retorts that's precisely the problem. His name is on it, meaning people will think that's what he actually looks like. The moment he sees King Zargadin, the one who commissioned it, he complains about how ugly the statue is. Takiro then decides to speak with the king and presents a letter from Grusus Pendersus, the representative of the Blacksmiths Guild in Belkane's merchant district. The letter requests permission for Takiro to enter the Ryujai mine to gather materials. Zargadin seems to know Grusus well and explains that several months ago, following a great earthquake, the mine became a den of demons. Takiro affirms he still wishes to go. And Clayton informs the king that Takiro is under his protection, adding that Belle is also a formidable warrior, so there's no need to worry. Hearing this, the king entrusts them with a mission: to uncover the truth behind the demonic activities in the Ryujai mine. Clayton accepts without hesitation, though Takiro is clueless about what truth they're supposed to uncover, reminding them he only needs to gather some Hydra ore. But Clay accepts the mission, ignoring him completely. Later, they meet Sambo, the head receptionist of the city's Adventurers Guild, who informs them he will be their guide through the tunnels. He opens a gate, and they proceed inside. Takiro casts a simple light spell and checks the map Sambo gave them. Using his skill to identify different ores, he notes that the mineral reaction around them feels weak. Sambo is surprised he can tell just by looking. As they venture deeper, Vi suddenly warns them of danger, and Clayton orders everyone to get their backs against the wall. Something approaches. Clay and Bell prepare for combat, and Takiro supports them with his magic, allowing Bell to finish off the monsters with her daggers. They continue into the depths where the magical concentration is stronger. Takiro reaches a dead end but senses something deeper behind the wall. He puts up a barrier, hardens the surface, and unleashes fire blasts, breaking through the wall. Sambo is stunned to see veins of Ildrite everywhere, a super rare ore. Takiro scans it and confirms it's an A-rank material, which Clayton notes is practically a magic stone. Vi alerts them to another danger just as Sambo yells that a demon is approaching. Takiro's expression immediately turns serious, and he asks Bell and Clay to let him handle this one, saying he really needs it. At that moment, a giant crab appears before them, but all Takiro and V can see is their dinner. Both Clayton and Bell are utterly baffled to see Takeru drooling over such a dangerous monster, and Clayton frantically tries to warn him that it's no time to celebrate, just as the giant crab nearly crushes him. Takiro swiftly dodges the attack, and Clayton explains they're up against a Trango crab, a fierce A-rank monster. Despite the warnings, Takeru only sees a potential main course, so he pulls out his staff and asks Bell to provide cover without using fire or lightning. Takeru then activates reduction and harden on his hands and feet, while Bell supports him with a sonic attack. As soon as he strikes the crab, Takeru realizes it's tougher than it looks, but that won't stop him. After dodging another attack, Bell uses her ice magic to freeze one of the crab's legs, allowing Takiro to use scan to find its weak spot. Once located, he casts a spell to create ice needles and combines them with Bell's magic to freeze the Trango crab completely solid. Everyone is stunned by the feat, having defeated the monster in a mere instant. However, Clayton is clearly upset and confronts Takeru, asking why they fought alone. Realizing his mistake, Takeru nervously explains he got carried away, adding that using blood-soaked weapons might have ruined the edible meat. Clayton can't believe he plans to eat it but reminds Takiro that he's his bodyguard and needs to trust his allies. He clarifies that they would never ignore his judgment, so Takeru and Bell apologize, and Clayton readily forgives them. After hauling the crab out, they extract the nearby ore, but Takeru detects stronger readings deeper in, prompting them to continue digging for a larger deposit. Sambo is overcome with emotion, thanking Takiro for defeating the demon and discovering the mine for them. This makes Takiro reflect on recent events, earthquakes, distortions, and awakened monsters, and wonder if the magical essence of Voldius had a greater impact than he imagined. Perhaps this is what the god meant when he said a single drop could change the world. He reflects that by doing things his own way, he might be slowly changing this world, hoping it's for the better. Later, when they meet with the king, Takiro reports that the mine investigation is complete and the main threat has been eliminated, which Sambo enthusiastically confirms. Takiro then reveals the frozen Trango crab, which the king mistakes for a fearsome Surguadan demon. Shocked by the terrifying creature, the king declares their feat worthy of a grand reward, prompting Takiro to cleverly decide that the crab itself will be his prize, and although the king is rather baffled by his request, he grants it. Shortly after, they leave the castle, and Bell is more than satisfied, stating that 3 million rabe each is an excellent haul. Takeru, however, is still fixated on the crab, planning to prepare some sashimi, followed by grilled crab, and maybe a hot pot. Bai is just as excited, but Clayton asks what they're thinking, so Takeru explains that the crab's tough shell could be used as excellent material for crafting gathering shears. The next day, Belle is ecstatic to receive her reward. A magnificent white steed, the legendary Pegasus she was searching for. Clayton also gets his prize, his precious spear, fully repaired and ready for action. Belle mounts the horse, explaining she must return home as the Pegasus is for her sister, and mentions she now owes Takeru a debt so great she could spend a lifetime repaying it. Takeru brushes it off, saying that since he got a crab in return, they're even. As her carriage arrives, Belle says her goodbyes, hoping to see him again. Back at the guild, Ariana is surprised to see Takeru and Clayton together and asks if they've formed a party. Takeru tries to downplay it, but Clayton interrupts, stating they've formed a temporary team of indefinite duration, which sends a thrilled Ariana rushing off to report it to Wade. Takeru gives Clayton an accusing look, but Clayton calmly explains that, since Takeru is a wanderer and more than human, having someone to watch his eccentric tendencies isn't a bad idea. Takeru finds it a bit insulting but can't argue, especially seeing how happy Bai is to have Clayton around. Though Clayton can be preachy, Takeru admits traveling together might not be so bad. Following Clayton's suggestion, they name their party the Blue-Black Brigade. With that settled, Takeru goes to meet Riel and Grossus to deliver the Hildrite ore. As the blacksmiths inspect it, they fall silent and begin to tremble, making Takeru nervous that its high purity might make it difficult to work with. But, suddenly, Grossus lets out a cry of euphoria, and both he and Riel burst into tears of joy. Riel says the ore's luster and density are perfect, and he's overjoyed Takeru found it. Instead of arguing, the two dwarves hug and cry even more, while Grossus exclaims he hasn't seen so much high-quality Hildrite in one place in 120 years. Takeru is just glad they're happy, reflecting that while his scan identified it as a perfect A-rank material, you never know if it's exactly what a client is looking for, and in the end, that matters more than market value, is delivering exactly what they need. Takeru realizes he's finally starting to feel pride in being a gatherer, and it makes him genuinely happy. Once Grossus calms down, he tells Takeru that with so much high-quality ore, there's no way they can pay him enough. But Takeru reminds them he only wants a pair of custom shears and they can sort that out later. For now, he wants them to use the stones to forge a sword so magnificent it will win first prize at the exhibition. Hearing this, Riel and Grossus immediately wipe their tears, filled with a new determination to win. A month and a half later, Takeru is enjoying a drink at the guild when Wade approaches with a letter, informing him he's received a summons from someone important. Clayton recognizes the wax seal as the crest of the House of Lusilvach, and Wade clarifies it's from the lord of the territory where Belkine is located. Unenthused, and seeing a lord as trouble waiting to happen, Takeru tries to fake a future stomachache, but Clayton tells him to stop making pathetic excuses. Wade assures him that Lord Belmont isn't the unpleasant type, so Takeru reads the letter, which is an invitation for both him and Clayton to visit the mansion. Since the Lord heard they formed a party, he summoned the entire Blue-Black Brigade. Takeru is still suspicious, and Clayton agrees it's likely just an excuse for the Lord to see Bai, the young dragon. This worries Takeru, who fears the Lord will try to take Bai, but Wade and Clayton reassure him that won't happen. Clayton adds that if the Lord did try anything, they'd simply leave Belkine. An excited Bai chimes in that they should head for the coast for some fresh sashimi, which finally convinces Takeru to go. They soon set off in a luxurious noble carriage, drawing lots of attention. Clayton explains that being summoned by a lord is an adventurer's dream, as noble backing provides immense credibility. As they enter the noble district, Takeru and Bai are stunned to see the mansion is an entire castle. They are greeted by a butler named Raymond and a perfectly synchronized formation of maids. A moment later, a young girl rushes up to them, inspects Bai, and after commenting that she expected more intelligence in his eyes, she demands Takeru hand him over, declaring the dragon now belongs to her. Stunned, Takeru refuses while a scared Bai hides behind him, but the girl doesn't seem to understand, explaining that since dragons are noble creatures, they can only belong to someone equally noble, as she is worthy of owning one. Realizing it's useless to reason with her, Takeru uses scan and discovers the girl is Laris Marcellus Levac, the 4-year-old only daughter of Count Belmont, the lord of these lands, who is currently home from her boarding school for the holidays. Unsure how to handle such an unreasonable child, Takeru kneels down and gently asks why she believes she has the right to the dragon. Surprised by his gentle tone, Laris explains that someone named Bernard told her an adventurer had a dragon, and that she should be firm and dignified to make the rude and ignorant adventurer obey her. Takeru immediately knows this Bernard is to blame, and tells Laris that Bai is part of his family and he can't give him away. Laris is shocked, and asks the dragon if his name is really Bai, who confirms with a small chirp. Not expecting a response, she's informed that Bai can understand human language. A guilty Laris, realizing she'd spoken cruelly without considering their bond, apologizes, and Bai easily forgives her, though he quickly regrets it when she hugs him too tightly. Takeru then asks why she wants a dragon so badly, and her expression saddens as she explains it was for her mother. Before she can cry, her father appears, a handsome man who Takeru is shocked to learn is the Lord, as he seems too young for the title. Belmont introduces himself, and after they sit for tea, he apologizes for his daughter's rude behavior. Clayton then asks why they were summoned, and Belmont reveals he needs to ask them for a favor concerning his wife. Clayton explains to Takeru that the lady has been bedridden for nearly half a year. Belmont elaborates that he heard rumors about Takeru after a sickly tenant in the Bospo district miraculously regained his health thanks to him. Takeru awkwardly admits it was likely his doing, and Belmont pleads with him to use his extraordinary power to save his wife. Takeru hesitates, knowing his magic is powerful enough to evolve Clayton, but he's unsure of the consequences if he were to imbalance something. Belmont explains that Laris wanted the dragon for her mother. Since Laris has to return to the capital for school soon, she thought an adorable creature might lift her mother's spirits, even just a little. Surprised by her true motives, Takeru is assured by Belmont that while his daughter may be a bit foolish, she has a kind heart. Overcome with emotion, Clayton begins to cry, remarking what a truly kind daughter Laris is. Clayton's tears leave Takeru utterly bewildered, and the way he's looking at him makes Takeru suspect he's being guilt-tripped into accepting. Bai is also crying uncontrollably, but Takeru remains hesitant. Belmont is a noble, and one wrong move could land him in serious trouble. Before giving an answer, Takeru asks to see his wife. Belmont misinterprets this as acceptance, and seeing the hope on the man's face, Takeru mentally scolds himself for not being clearer but feels he has no choice but to go along. Belmont leads him through the castle to his wife's room, where Takeru instantly notices the place hasn't been aired out in days. The sheer amount of dust makes even Clayton sneeze, but Takeru ignores it to focus on the real problem, Belmont's wife. She asks what brings him here, and her husband explains he's brought the man rumored to cure illnesses with a mysterious power. Seeing her in person, Takeru is shocked by her frail and deplorable condition, unable to speak a word. Belmont urges him closer, but Takeru first asks if they can brighten the room, which isn't possible due to her sensitivity to sunlight. With that, Takeru approaches her to silently assess her condition, using scan. His skill reveals she is Mary Lateria, a 2-year-old woman suffering from complex cataracts, a gait disorder, anemia, kidney problems, Ibver poisoning, and other complications. Her body is clearly riddled with diseases. He tells Belmont he can probably treat some symptoms like light sensitivity and various pains, which makes Belmont's face light up with hope. However, Takeru is privately concerned about the Ibver poisoning, something he's never heard of. He tells Belmont that everything depends on his trust, asking if he will truly place his wife's life in the hands of an unknown adventurer. Belmont hesitates, but Mary Lateria interjects, saying she trusts her husband's decision and would be happy just to hug her daughter Laris one more time. Moved to tears but with an expression of pure determination, Belmont begs Takeru to save her. That is enough to make up Takeru's mind, and he finally agrees to do it. Clayton asks if Takeru will use the same technique as before to heal her wounds, but Takeru declines, explaining that the spell consumes an enormous amount of mana, meaning in Eulalia's current, weakened state, her body wouldn't be able to withstand it. Instead, he knows the first priority is to deal with the dark, stuffy room. He asks for Eulalia's permission to start with her eyes, since she mentioned the light was blinding. She closes her eyes and allows it, so Takeru concentrates deeply, carefully controlling the amount of mana for his healing magic. Knowing that if he channels too much too quickly, it would undoubtedly cause her pain. A few seconds later, he asks her to try opening her eyes, and the moment Eulalia does, she is overjoyed to realize she can finally see clearly. With that confirmed, Takeru immediately uses his staff to cast his cleansing magic. A powerful gust of wind sweeps through the room, flinging open the windows and clearing away all the dust in mere seconds. This also lets in the light after a long time, prompting Belminen to immediately ask his wife if she's alright. Eulalia smiles with tears in her eyes and, with great relief, says the light no longer hurts her. Belminen weeps with happiness beside her, but even as everyone celebrates, Takeru's worried expression remains as he looks at the others in the room. Takeru asks Belminen to move to another location to speak privately and Belminen agrees. Once they are finally alone, Takeru informs him that his wife has been ingesting something called the Ibel toxin, suggesting a high probability that someone has been poisoning her. Since he's unfamiliar with the biological mechanism behind the Ibel poisoning, he cannot completely cure her condition, so it would be helpful if he could obtain the antidote. After processing the information, Belminen clarifies that no such antidote exists because the Ibel poison is a forbidden toxin, lost to time, and the antidote was lost along with it. Takeru remains determined, suggesting they create one, stating that if they can get the original poison, they should be able to do it. Clayton tells him that even if they could craft it, the poison dates back to an ancient era, so they don't even know if the ingredients still exist. At that moment, Belmonen realizes he might have a clue and immediately fetches some ancient documents, explaining that his ancestors compiled records of ancient lords in them. However, many are written in an ancient language, so they haven't been able to decipher them. Takero takes one of the books and confirms that, thanks to his ability, he can read the ancient script. The real problem is figuring out which of the books mentions the Ibel poison, and he thinks how useful it would be to search for keywords like on a computer. With that in mind, Takero tries to adapt his search ability, narrowing its focus. And the new skill works instantly as one of the many books begins to glow, indicating it contains the information he seeks. Takero opens the book and reports there's a section on the Ibel flower. Belmonen asks him to read it aloud, so Takero clears his throat and suddenly begins to read in a feminine voice, reciting the travel journal of Pola Pola, an adventurer who describes herself as the cutest one of all. An awkward silence follows, prompting Clayton to ask if he's mocking them. But Takero assures him that's literally how it's written in the journal. Belmonen decides to ignore it and asks him to continue. So Takero puts on a serious expression as he resumes speaking in the girlish voice. The adventurer in the journal, Pola Pola, describes resting on an old, horse-shaped rock near a massive lake when she found the most beautiful and brilliant golden flower she had ever seen, which turned out to be a super rare flower called the Ibel. Takero's recital is suddenly cut short by Clayton, who claps a hand over his mouth to silence him and mentions that he knows a place with a horse-shaped rock next to a large lake. Belmonen quickly pulls out a map, and Clayton points to a spot near a small village called Shit, stating that the lake and rock can be found there. Belmonen identifies it as the Banon region, which is outside of Luz Labacha territory, noting that even by carriage, the journey is 5 days one way. Takero declares that they must leave immediately, so Belmonen prepares 2 horses for them. Meanwhile, one of the butlers, Bernard, watches them from a distance and releases a messenger pigeon. Before leaving, Takero places a magic stone outside the mansion, explaining it's a security measure. After all, someone might try something against Eulalia while they're away, so it's better to be prepared. Just then, Tiaris runs up to him and apologizes, saying she spoke rudely to the very person who is going to save her mother. Takero smiles and admits her words were unpleasant, but tells her that the fact she realized her mistake on her own is something to be proud of. He explains that when someone realizes they might be wrong, they become capable of listening to others, which makes their life fuller and richer. Seeing the tears in her eyes, Takero asks her to take her time from now on and think things through, one at a time. Tiaris accepts, promising to think for herself properly. Then, Takero warns her that while he's away, someone might try to tell her things, like that he's the villain or that he's deceiving her. If that happens, he wants her not to respond immediately but to first talk to her father to practice Ho Ren So, as he puts it, report, contact, and consult. With that settled, Takero and Clayton finally depart, and Takero casts speed and reduction on all of them. Clayton immediately notices his body feels lighter, but before he can react, his horse bolts forward at full speed. After some time, they finally arrive at the location Clayton had mentioned, but it's a deserted area. A confused Takero asks if there was supposed to be a village here. Clayton clarifies that the last time he passed through, it was a prosperous farming region, so he doesn't know what happened. As they search for the lake, Takero comments that it seems like it hasn't rained in a long time, speculating that the lake has dried up. Clayton assures him that a lake so large shouldn't just disappear. After a while, they finally find it, but it's not what they were expecting. Clayton remarks that the last time he was here, the place was beautiful, but now it looks completely different. Takero approaches the water to use his ability, which informs him that this is Gale's Lake, the only water source in the Banon region, said to be a spring created by a sacred beast and known for never running dry. However, the water now contains paleocyanotoxin, a poison extracted from the horns of the Garanode buffalo. This leads Takero to believe the entire situation was deliberately caused, but before he can explain, some villagers approach to see what they are doing. Despite their defensive postures, Takero smiles and steps forward, introducing them as adventurers who accepted a quest in Belkane to gather rare materials. The villagers are surprised they came all the way from Belkane but still demand proof that they belong to the guild. Clayton shows them his rank bracelet, and the villagers immediately lower their weapons. Suddenly, Gonza, a young boy with them, collapses. Takero catches him, instantly noticing how incredibly light he is, and asks the others if they haven't been eating enough. Their sorrowful expressions confirm it, so he asks them to explain what happened. Carrying the boy on his back, Takero follows the villagers to their village as they recount their story. About 10 months ago, the lake turned a cursed color, fish began to die, and the well water also spoiled, leaving them helpless. It was then that a merchant named Enganche saved them by offering to help in exchange for a brilliant golden flower that grew by the lake. The flower matched the description of the divine flower from their legends, but its location was a village secret. They agreed to give him one plant a month for 60 barrels of water, but this wasn't enough for their crops, and food has been scarce ever since. Clayton realizes this divine flower must be the eyeball flower they're looking for, and Takero agrees. Knowing there's more to the story. He tells the villagers Enganche sounds like a terrible person, but they insist he was good to them. Takero urges them to reconsider, pointing out how suspicious it was that Enganche appeared right when the water turned bad and immediately offered help. He reveals that his earlier analysis showed the water was deliberately contaminated and adds that anyone asking for a dangerous toxin every month is inherently suspicious. The villagers, who had no idea the flowers were poisonous, begin to cry as Takero bluntly tells them they were deceived. Enganche tricked these people, let their children starve, and used the eyeball poison to harm someone else, an act Takero cannot forgive. Now fully determined to destroy the man's vile scheme, he immediately has Davi use spirit magic. The small dragon flies above the clouds and unleashes a powerful roar, causing the clouds to turn dark gray in seconds and, to the villagers' amazement, it begins to rain for the first time in ages. Once Takero deems it sufficient, he has Davi stop and then draws his staff, casting cleansing magic over all the villagers, followed by a repair spell that restores the entire village in an instant. Announcing that it's time for a grand meal, he pulls an enormous pot from his bag and prepares his favorite soup for everyone. As the villagers celebrate, one of them expresses his gratitude, but laments they have nothing to offer in return. Takero reassures him, stating that all he asks for is permission to find and collect the eyeball flower for someone who desperately needs its antidote. The villager quickly agrees to lead them there, though he hints at a small problem. Before he can elaborate, the village children flock to Takero, eager to play. The elder starts to scold them, but Clayton intervenes, assuring him that being entrusted with the location of their precious flower is more than enough payment. Meanwhile, Gonza leads Takero to his secret base, a barn where they store the fruit from last autumn's harvest. Gonza explains that while the flower's nectar is sweet, the fruit is inedibly salty and always thrown away. Intrigued, Takero tries a piece and is stunned to discover it tastes exactly like soy sauce. Back at the Luz Labacha mansion, an alarm blares, and Thierry's races desperately towards her mother's room. Knowing it's the barrier Takero set up, designed to trigger if anyone with malicious intent got close. When she arrives, she finds Bernard trying to force the door open. Seeing her fear, Bernard calmly tries to placate her, denying he has any reason to harm her mother when she confronts him. Tiaris recounts Takero's warning about the alarm, but Bernard scoffs, attempting to manipulate her by painting adventurers as rude, greedy people, and calling the alarm a mere trick to deceive her. However, Tiaris immediately refutes his claims, declaring that Takero is kind and far more polite and respectful than she herself has been. With a menacing look, Bernard asks her to think carefully. Who should she trust, a rootless, wandering adventurer, or someone who has served her family with absolute loyalty? The answer, he insists, should be obvious. Terrified, Tiaris runs to her father the moment he appears and requests Ho Ren So. After hearing both sides, Belminen admits it's possible Takero is deceiving them, but it's also true that he improved Eulalia's condition and the alarm he set is now indicating Bernard is a threat. Unable to determine the truth, he decides to have Bernard prove his innocence. Belminen pours a glass of the special water Bernard had provided for Eulalia's treatment and demands he drink it. Bernard hesitates, but Belminen presses, reminding him he had claimed it was nutritious. Seeing Bernard's nervousness, Belminen splashes the water on him. Bernard screams in panic, shouting that it's poison and collapsing dramatically. However, Belminen calmly takes a sip, revealing it's just plain water, as the actual medicine Bernard provided remains sealed. With Bernard's guilt exposed, Belminen has Raymond call the guards. After the arrest, Raymond informs him they found a letter among Bernard's belongings. Tiaris is unable to read the strange language, but Belminen is too shocked to respond. Meanwhile, in Shit Village, a man impatiently pounds on a door. A villager, disturbed by the noise, confronts him, only to have his expression change in recognition. Back at the mansion, Belmanin examines the letter and determines it's written in cipher, concluding that the mastermind is far more sophisticated than a common thug. Raymond agrees, suggesting this could be tied to a much larger organization. The man in the village is revealed to be Enganche, who has come to collect this month's Ibel flowers. The villager informs him that the village chief is out guiding some adventurers. Enganche is displeased, and his mood sours further when the villager adds that they've learned the Ibel flower is poisonous and can no longer hand it over. At these words, Enganche utters a single command, and in an instant, a group of armed bandits appears, their hostile intentions clear. Enganche informs the villager there has been a change of plans, declaring they will end everything right here and now. Meanwhile, Bernard is being transported by the guards, but even though it should all be over for him, a sly smile remains on his face, making it clear he is still plotting something. Elsewhere, the village chief guides Takaro and Clayton to the place where the Ibel flower grows, and after a while, he notes the ground is becoming sandy, a sign they are getting close. A few minutes later, they find the very horse statue mentioned in the adventurer's ancient documents. It is surrounded by golden flowers shimmering with a resplendent light, and behind it stretches a vast lake, just as they had hoped. Seeing it in person is far more breathtaking than they could have imagined. Takaro finally understands why it's called the Divine Flower. The imposing statue seems celestially illuminated by the moonlight, making the flowers glow with an almost magical radiance. Awed by the sight, Takaro, Clayton, and even the village chief take a moment to admire its beauty in stunned silence. Kaido rushes over to the flowers and immediately activates his scanning ability, discovering it's the Iver flower, an S-rank specimen that grows only on the shores of Lake Gales, said to have sprung from the tears of the sacred beast, Hofvalnir. Its fruit, the Iver berry, can be processed into a lethal substance known as Iver poison. Knowing nothing about this beast, Kaido listens as the village chief recounts an ancient legend. Long ago, Lord Hofvalnir saved their ancestors from a lake demon, and these miraculous flowers sprouted from the very tears shed by the beast god. Hearing this, Kaido hesitates to take something so sacred, but the chief insists, reminding Kaido that he saved their village and is welcome to take as much as he needs. Wasting no more time, Kaido carefully takes one flower, root and all, now only needing to return to Belka to prepare the antidote, though he's privately eager to finish the mission so he can experiment with the potent plant. However, just as their task seems complete, a villager sprints towards them in a panic, bearing terrible news. They rush back to find the village engulfed in flames, and Kaido immediately snaps into action, ordering Sylphid to extinguish the fires while Claystone rescues anyone trapped inside. As they battle the inferno, a villager explains that the thug, Gans, had returned demanding the Iver flowers. When they refused, knowing now that it was poison, he retaliated by setting the entire village ablaze. As if that weren't bad enough, the villagers then report that a young boy named Gonza is missing. An elderly man steps forward, revealing he witnessed Gans take the boy hostage amidst the chaos, dragging him away towards the lake. Now utterly enraged, Kaido instantly activates his search skill at its maximum range, pinpointing an abandoned fort in the distance with 96 human signatures inside. He informs Claystone that he's located a base with nearly 100 thugs, prompting the terrified village chief to try and stop them, certain it's a suicide mission. But Kaido reassures him, reminding the chief that he has an insanely strong A-rank adventurer by his side and confidently declares they will definitely bring Gonza back. Without another moment's hesitation, the two head straight for the fort. Upon reaching the abandoned fort, Sylphid scouts ahead and reports back to Kaido that the bandits are in the middle of a boisterous celebration. Hearing this, Claystone's fury erupts, and he instantly transforms into his ancient, more powerful form, roaring that he cannot forgive those who would burn an innocent village and then party as if nothing happened. Kaido panics and immediately stops him, warning the hot-headed golem that if they charge in recklessly, Gonza's life will be in grave danger. Claystone quickly apologizes, and Kaido can't help but marvel at how someone so terrifying can be so docile. When Claystone asks how he's supposed to contain his explosive rage, Kaido tells him to hold on while he devises a stealth plan. Using a powerful concealment spell, they successfully infiltrate the fort, where Claystone silently knocks out a patrolling guard. As they move, Claystone questions why Kaido is collecting various items, and Kaido explains his meticulous strategy. They don't know where the poison or other crucial evidence is hidden, so it's best to gather everything. A cunning detail Claystone can only admire. After searching for a while with no sign of Gonza, they realize they'll need to force a confession. Meanwhile, in the main hall, Gans and his thugs are reveling in their victory, bragging about the thrill of torching the village. One thug mentions that the boy still hasn't told them where the flowers are, but another callously remarks they'll just have to beat the information out of him. Their master plan is then revealed. They intend to secretly poison the wife of the beloved Lord Luzlavak. Once word spreads that even the best healers can't cure her and rumors point to the Ivor poison, the demand for it as a weapon will skyrocket, allowing them to sell it at an exorbitant price and become unimaginably rich. As the bandit finishes his gloating speech, Gans suddenly hurls a bottle at him, shutting him up. He warns his men to keep their mouths shut about the top-secret plan, threatening to throw anyone who talks into Lake Gales, but it's already too late. Kaido and Claystone have heard everything. No longer able to contain his rage, Claystone prepares to charge, but Kaido allows him to unleash his fury on one condition: he must not kill anyone. With that, Claystone smashes through the wall and tears into the room full of bandits, roaring for them to prepare themselves as he begins taking them down one by one. Gans panics and desperately orders a subordinate to bring him that thing, ignoring the warning that it's still uncontrollable. Amidst the chaos, Kaido cleverly uses a concealment spell to disguise himself as a bandit and tricks Gans into revealing that Gonza is being held in the other building. While Kaido rushes to the location, Sylphid neutralizes the guard, allowing Kaido to pinpoint the cell from Gonza's cries for help. He shatters the lock with a single, magically reinforced blow, and a tearful Gonza runs into his arms. Carrying the boy on his back, Kaido promises they're going home, but as they exit, they see the bandits fleeing in sheer terror from a monstrous creature. Realizing they aren't running from Claystone, Kaido stops a frantic thug who screams that it's the lake demon before taking off again. Kaido knows that while Claystone is in his powerful form, he might still need support against such a foe, but he refuses to leave the traumatized Gonza alone. Deciding to protect the boy while aiding his friend, he erects a protective barrier around them and charges back into the fray. He finds Claystone battling a giant anemone-like monster, and a quick scan reveals it to be a B-rank dark anemone, a summoned beast with paralyzing, venomous tentacles. Kaido immediately knows Gans is responsible, and when the cowering thug spots him and begs to be saved, Kaido coldly retorts that he brought this upon himself. Just then, a massive tentacle whips down towards them. Kaido swiftly dodges the strike, instinctively throwing up a protective barrier around Gans just moments before impact. The force of the blow knocks Gans unconscious, and with a quick "I'll explain later," Kaido rushes to support Claystone, apologizing for the delay. Claystone says the boy's safety is all that matters, but they have a serious problem. The beast's damned tentacles keep regenerating no matter how many times he slices them off. Kaido declares that their only option is to take out all the tentacles at once, and raising his staff, he unleashes Ice Breath, a powerful whirlwind of frost that engulfs the monster. As the dark anemone freezes solid, Claystone notes its movements have slowed, but Kaido warns it's not dead yet and tells him to smash its core to finish it for good. Claystone understands and delivers a devastating punch right to the monster's center, an attack so powerful it even astonishes Kaido and Gonza. In its death throes, the creature flails wildly, and one of its frozen tentacles swings directly at them. The force of the impact launches them both into the air, but Kaido thinks fast, tossing Gonza towards Sylphid and yelling for her to protect the boy as he himself plummets helplessly into the lake below. Kaido knows that even with his rare skills, swimming in poison is a death sentence, wryly noting that his body often moves on instinct before his brain can catch up. As he sinks, the black-haired god observes from another plane, remarking that for all of Kaido's complaints, he never abandons anyone in need and decides to grant him a gift. Kaido, meanwhile, watches the surface fade away, thinking he doesn't want to die yet because there's so much he still wants to do. Suddenly, the celestial voice of a goddess echoes, asking who has summoned her, but Kaido is completely oblivious, his mind consumed with regrets about the delicious food he still wanted to try, especially since he'd finally found soy sauce. As the goddess addresses him as the bearer of her blessing, he again tunes her out, thinking about how he wanted to watch Sylphid grow up and how, even though Claystone and Belle would probably be fine, he never got to use his ultimate pair of scissors. The goddess tries to get his attention as Kaido sinks deeper, his mind flooding with a cascade of regrets for all the things he never got to do. Just then, a majestic white steed plucks him from the water, and a divine voice speaks through it, chiding him for trying to die on his own. Though confused, Kaido introduces himself, and the goddess reveals her name, Hofulnir. The name sounds familiar, though he can't quite place it, and he nervously apologizes for falling into her home. She tells him it doesn't matter and bids him to look down. He is stunned to see the once black, toxic water turn crystal clear, and the dead vegetation along the shore burst back to vibrant life. The goddess explains that she has purified her sacred land. Ages ago, as her power waned and the lake was choked by a stagnant tide, she poured her remaining essence into creating the purifying Iver flowers. This act turned her to stone, a silent guardian, until wicked humans defiled her sanctuary. However, by absorbing the corrupt mana essence from the lake, Kaido inadvertently restored her strength, allowing her to cleanse the waters once more. Kaido is just glad he could help, and the goddess gently returns him to the shore where his friends are overjoyed to see him alive. When he explains that a goddess saved him, Hofvalnir clarifies through their mental link that he saved her as well, to which Kaido replies that it makes them even. Realizing from Claystone's confusion that only he can hear her voice, Kaido listens as the goddess offers her eternal gratitude before fading away. With Gonza returned safely to his joyous village, Kaido wastes no time, setting up a circle of magic stones to test a new spell. Despite Claystone's understandable concern about its safety, Kaido reassures him, explaining it's a teleportation spell called Gate that he's been planning. Trusting their friend's ingenuity, they all step inside and are instantly transported back to the city. With the help of the guild's apothecary, the Iver flower is quickly refined into a potent antidote, and once it's ready, Kaido immediately heads for the Lord's mansion to deliver it. He arrives at the Luzlavach mansion with the medicine, and after Lady Mealateria takes it, his scan confirms that the Iver poisoning and all its complications have vanished. With a relieved smile, Kaido informs a tense Belmanon that his wife is completely free of the poison. The news breaks the tension, and young Teary immediately bursts into tears, rushing to embrace the mother she's missed for so long. Belmanon is overwhelmed with joy, watching his wife hold their daughter once more, a heartfelt reunion so powerful that even the mighty Claystone is moved to tears. With the family safely reunited, they return to Ashlet village, where the chief is still reeling from the violent events. Kaido reassures him, explaining that Gans and his entire crew have been turned over to the authorities along with irrefutable evidence, ensuring the village's safety for good. Overcome with emotion, the chief tearfully says he can never repay him, but Kaido brushes it off, saying that while he doesn't want payment, he does have a proposal. He prepares a simple dish of buttered potatoes and drizzles the juice of the local Litas fruit over it, which miraculously tastes just like soy sauce. The village chief is blown away by the delicious flavor, and this sparks an idea for Kaido, who lays out his business plan. He wants to establish a trade route to buy their Litas fruit in bulk, using the profits to help them expand their cultivation. When the chief expresses doubt they could sell so much, Kaido confidently predicts that once the soy sauce takes off in Belka, the Litas fruit will become Ashlet village's signature export. Thrilled by the prospect of a prosperous future, the chief eagerly agrees. To celebrate, Kaido cooks for the entire village, and after a heartwarming feast and fond farewells, Kaido, Sylphid, and Claystone set off once again on their journey. As they walk, Claystone asks how he's feeling after such a major undertaking, and Kaido admits that despite the success, he's utterly drained, so much so, he thinks he's starting to hallucinate a glowing light in the sky. Claystone, confused, looks up only to see that Kaido isn't imagining it. A brilliant white sphere is indeed descending towards them. From the sphere emerges a magnificent white steed with powerful wings, its sudden appearance startling the mighty golem. Claystone, completely spooked, remarks that if it's a hallucination, then they must be sharing it, because he's seeing it too. The magnificent white steed lands gracefully before them, and the divine voice assures them it's very real. Kaido instantly recognizes the horse, but for the life of him, he can't recall its complex name, fumbling with a made-up one as he asks why it's here. The goddess again addresses him as the bearer of her blessing, And suddenly, the majestic steed begins to glow, transforming in a matter of seconds into a stunningly beautiful, white-haired woman. The sudden change leaves Kaito, Claystone, and even Sylphid completely speechless. The goddess, Hofvalner, explains that having been bound to her sacred land for ages, she has decided to accompany Kaito on his journey to see the world. A bewildered Claystone respectfully asks the goddess why, of all the people in the world, she would choose to follow this man. Hofvalner simply laughs, stating that a life with Kaito seems far too entertaining to pass up, and besides, he did wish for a horse. Kaito sheepishly admits this is true, though this wasn't quite what he had in mind. She assures him there is no finer steed, and he's welcome to ride her anytime he wishes, a suggestion that makes Kaito smile with extreme discomfort as he wonders if it's even permissible to recruit an actual god into an adventuring party. Despite his apprehension and a strong feeling that this will lead to a whole new set of problems, the sacred beast Hofvalner officially joins their group. Upon their return, Takaru wastes no time and heads straight to Gurasu, commissioning a new pair of gathering shears. Gurasu reveals that thanks to the fang Takaru brought him, the sword he forged won first prize, so as a token of gratitude, he promises to craft a pair of shears so perfect they will be without equal. With that promise secured, Takara leaves the shop, eagerly anticipating the final product. Outside, Hofbafner waits patiently in her human form. Despite her being the sacred guardian of Lake Galios, Takaru has decided to simply call her Puni for short. She had wanted to travel the world, which somehow translated into following him, and he's been unable to shake her off ever since. As he emerges from the forge, Puni playfully asks if she should use a whip to make Gurasu work faster, an idea Takaru immediately shuts down, stating that the blacksmith will finish in his own time, which is more than enough for him. Puni easily accepts this and instead demands he buy her some butter and soy sauce potatoes from a food stall. He reminds her she just ate, but she insists this time is different, making Takaro wonder how this person could possibly be a benevolent divine guardian. However, it's clear that Ivy also wants more potatoes, but Puni mistakenly declares that Ivy is too full while she intends to keep eating. Ivy doesn't take kindly to her speaking for him, and the two quickly start bickering, with Puni ridiculously claiming the potatoes she ate before must have been an illusion. Realizing he's losing control, Takaru is saved when Grid appears to speak with him. Once at the guild, Grid explains the upcoming festival, an officially sanctioned, annual material gathering competition where adventurers compete for bragging rights, and he was hoping Takaru would participate. Since it's a competition, Puni immediately declares her assistance is essential, but Takaru tells her to be quiet, saying that simply gathering for clients is enough for him. Grid understands but clarifies that this is a personal request from someone very important. Ariana elaborates that the request comes directly from the Lord of Belkin, Count Belmont Lushlabach, as the festival is held under his patronage, and he has specifically asked for Takaru's participation. With no way to refuse such a high-profile request, Takaru has little choice. A few days later, a huge crowd of hopeful adventurers gathers outside the guild for the event. The guildmaster steps forward to announce this year's challenge. A direct request from Lord Lushlabach himself. A gift to delight his wife upon her recovery. Their mission is to collect the 7-colored wool from the rainbow sheep, a creature so rare Takaru has never even heard of it. The guildmaster declares that rank is irrelevant in this contest. Anyone lucky enough to find it can win. However, if they are unfamiliar with the target, they must research it themselves, as asking others for information is strictly forbidden. While networking is a key part of being an adventurer, this is a pure test of individual gathering prowess, and if their own knowledge is insufficient, they must rely on public resources like the library. If they need transportation, they must rent a horse or take a shared wagon. Puni quickly grasps the implication. She's out. The guild master confirms this, stating that no assistance from one's party is allowed, meaning all the glory and the prize will go to the sole winner. Clay comments that this means the Azure Black Brigade will be sitting this one out. Takaru acknowledges this but is relieved they haven't banned magic, which he knows would have been a nightmare. Clay asks about his plan, pointing out that by using Gate, he could likely finish the quest in half an hour. However, Takaru dismisses the idea, preferring to avoid any controversy or the annoying complaints that would follow such a showy move. With the rules laid out, the guild master officially declares the start of the competition. As everyone rushes off, Ivy bursts into tears, refusing to be separated from Takaru. he tries to explain. But Ivy just clings tighter, licking his face. Just as it seems nothing will work, Puni steps in and holds Ivy, who instantly calms down. A stunned Clay asks how on earth she managed that. Puni explains that she lent him a bit of her divine mana. The combination of crying and the sudden power surge simply exhausted him. Takuro feels a pang of guilt, but Puni reassures him that she will take excellent care of Ivy. With his mind at ease, Takuro thanks her and takes off, making a beeline for the library where he uses his search spell to instantly gather all information on the rainbow sheep. He learns they live on the sacred summit of Mount Tokurguana and sets off at once, using magic to lighten his body for incredible speed. Before long, he's at the mountain's base, ready to ascend into the brutal environment near the peak. It's been a while since he's been out alone, and he feels more uneasy without Ivy than he expected. He worries that Ivy is even more anxious and hopes the little guy isn't stress-eating, though he can't help but think a chubby Ivy would be rather adorable. Meanwhile, that's exactly what's happening, as a tearful Ivy anxiously munches on butter potatoes. Puni tells him to stop moping, reminding him that a child under her divine protection has nothing to fear. Besides, she boasts, when it comes to speed, no mere human like Takuro could ever hope to outrun a divine steed like herself. This comment, of course, deeply offends Ivy, but Puni just doubles down, goading him. Before things escalate, Clay masterfully steps in to de-escalate, calmly telling Puni there is no need for a demonstration, as everyone already knows her speed is unparalleled. His flattery works instantly. Puni, completely placated, agrees that since he understands her greatness, she won't press the issue. Ivy, however, remains absolutely fuming. But Clay smoothly tells Ivy that no soul alive can dance through the skies faster than him. To everyone's surprise, this simple praise instantly pacifies Ivy, and he and Puni peacefully resume eating their butter potatoes. Clay is in disbelief that Takuru's advice to simply flatter them if they started fighting actually worked almost too well. Unsure how long this fragile peace will last, he prays for Takuru's swift return. Meanwhile, Takuro himself is happily enjoying some self-made dumplings while camping for the night. The next morning, he spots a flock of colorful sheep and uses scan to identify them as the rare rank rainbow sheep, herbivores that live only in the highlands. They are extremely cautious, evading predators with lightning-fast movements, and their meat is tough and unappetizing. Remembering a book from the library mentioning their incredible speed and wary nature, Takuro wonders how to approach them. Just then, he recalls a technique he learned from an animal expert, or perhaps it was someone from the northern farmlands. In a flash, he's surrounded by the entire flock. He gently asks if he could just take a little of their soft, warm wool, and one sheep immediately curls up in his lap, which he finds overwhelmingly adorable. Thanks to the sheep's full cooperation, he easily clips a bit of wool, marveling at its incredible softness. But just as he thinks he's done, he realizes the other sheep are now eagerly lining up, happily offering their wool as well, a bizarre scene witnessed by a pair of dumbfounded adventurers from a distance. Heading back much sooner than anticipated with far more wool than he expected, Takuro is awestruck by the sight of a real wyvern in the sky, a first for him, making him wonder if Ivy will one day look so majestic. When he finally returns, however, Ivy is still his same little self, bursting into tears of joy upon seeing him. At the guild master announces the winner, the adventurer who brought back the most rainbow sheep wool in the shortest time, obviously Takuro. But his victory brings more than just a prize. Later, the guild master explains a new rank designation for him. F-B rank. A title for so-called all-rounders, certified adventurers who can take jobs spanning from the lowest F rank up to a high B rank. What makes this special is that the base reward, normally fixed by the adventurer's rank, will now adjust based on the job's rank. Takuro understands this means he can continue taking low-rank requests from his regular clients for the same affordable price. The guildmaster clarifies, however, that while a little extra value is fine, if he delivers something so far above the expected quality that it disrupts market prices, there will be problems. Grid explains the real point. Everyone, from the staff at OURO, the people at Callisto, clients across Belkine, and even Lord Lushlabach himself, wants to pay him what his skills are truly worth. This new rank is their way of respecting his wishes while also ensuring he is treated fairly. They ask him to consider it. Takuro is stunned that so many people think so highly of him, but Puni bluntly reminds him that he's blessed with divine protection, so trying to act like an insignificant, average human is pointless. While Takeru muses that being an ordinary nobody would have been just fine, he also knows he'd be long dead without his powers. Realizing he can't refuse, he finally accepts. The guildmaster presents him with the F-B rank ring, but just then, Ariana rushes in with bad news. A forest worm has appeared near the main road and is heading for the city. It's too much for ordinary adventurers to handle, so the guildmaster tells them he's counting on them. The newly formed party rushes to the forest, where they see the massive monster approaching. As the forest worm emerges, Takeru recognizes the voice coming from it. Suddenly, Belle appears, revealing she's the one riding it. Ivy is overjoyed to see her, and Belle rushes towards Takeru, explaining she's been searching everywhere for him. However, Takeru nearly panics at how filthy she is and immediately casts a cleaning spell on her before she can get any closer. Once she's pristine, he calmly asks why she's riding a giant monster. Belle explains she has a favor to ask, and since she heard he was looking for a unicorn, she brought Kiraslos, a creature she was close to in her homeland. When Takeru realizes she means the worm, he quickly casts another cleaning spell on it, declaring that it stinks. The worm promptly burrows into the ground to hide from him, and Takeru states he wants nothing to do with something so huge. Belle concedes that a unicorn would probably suit him better after all. Puni, however, scoffs that a unicorn is just an ordinary horse and can't compare to her own magnificence. Belle asks who the newcomer is, but Takeru just says it's a long story and they should head back to the city. That evening, they all celebrate Belle's return with a dinner party, the first one they've had in a while. Takeru catches her up on everything, how he and Clay formed a party, took on the Lord's request and traveled to Asher Town, and how they met the sacred guardian deity of the lake who, for various reasons, ended up joining them. Hearing this, Belle asks if she can join their party too, revealing she had planned to ask him if they ever met again. Takeru warmly welcomes her. Belle says she's been training hard to improve herself for this very day. Just then, Clay notices her A-rank ring. Belle explains she trained relentlessly and reached A-rank after they parted ways. Puni suddenly remarks that the pure aura Belle carries is comforting even to her spirit, and she can guess Belle's true identity. Belle quickly stops her, politely asking her not to speak of it. Puni understands it's not a secret she wants to keep forever and agrees to stay silent, knowing Belle will share it when the time is right. Belle thanks her sincerely and says she has nothing to hide, as long as they are willing to hear her request first. She then informs Takeru that her older brother, Reincarnates, has run away from their homeland, and she needs him to find him. Takeru clearly didn't expect such a bombshell. Belle explains that Reincarnates was chosen by their village to be the Shrine Maiden, tasked with bearing the next generation of leaders. It was her destiny to marry within their clan, an honor and obligation passed down through tradition. However, Reincarnates threw a fit, refusing to marry a man she didn't like and insisting on a condition for the marriage. She demanded a white Pegasus, one so beautiful it couldn't possibly exist. Yet, when Belle returned with such a creature, her sister was already gone. That's when she realized that if anyone could find her, it would be Takeru. Takeru points out that Reincarnates ran away to avoid the marriage, so is bringing her back really the right thing to do? Belle's expression saddens as she clarifies that her goal isn't to drag her sister back, but simply to understand why she left without a word. Hearing this, Takeru agrees to take the job, and Clay naturally agrees to come along. With everyone on board, the party, guided by Belle, sets off for the Elven homeland, a place deep within a forest that only opens under special conditions. They first head to the Tapiron forest, where Belle explains the elves weave a path using their own magical power, a sort of spatial magic she can't fully explain to outsiders. Hearing their destination, Puni transforms into her magnificent beast form, offering them a ride on her back. Belle is thrilled by the majestic sight, and thanks to Puni's incredible speed, they reach the forest in an instant. There, Belle uses her power, speaking to the goddess Libellania to reveal the path. Puni huffs that Libellania is merely a lesser spirit and that Belle should rely on her instead, prompting Takeru to wonder why she's so competitive. He lets Belle proceed, and a black vortex appears. She instructs them to touch it with their eyes closed to be transported. Belle vanishes, followed quickly by Clay and Ivy. Takeru hesitates, but Puni stops him with a cryptic warning. Keep your eyes on that elf. Do not be fooled by her radiance. Even the brightest light casts the darkest shadow. You must be a light strong enough to overcome that darkness. Without another word, she disappears into the vortex. After a moment's thought, Takeru follows, arriving in the breathtaking elven homeland. Before he can take it in, the others appear, looking drained. Clay chides him for being late, and Puni remarks they were starting to worry. Before Takeru can ask what happened, an arrow flies past his head. He instantly erects a shield as a volley of arrows rains down, but Belle catches one mid-air and tells them to stop, recognizing the arrowhead from her village. Just then, an elf appears, addressing Belle directly. "I sense someone desecrating our sacred grounds. I'm not surprised it was you." Belle's expression falls once more, and Takeru recalls Puni's words about the brightest light casting the darkest shadow. And with that, episode 9 comes to an end.